let's look at input operations next. A while ago, in the previous lessons, we did this. We had first name is equal to John, and then we said last name is equal to Wick. Okay? And then we said print, and we had our F string, and we can say first name and last name. And if you run that, it displays our variables. Now, what if you want to ask the user for their inputs rather than fixing it this way? There's a function called input. In this case, we'll ask the user for their first name, and we can say input. Now, when you say input, this will simply, if I run this, it will simply ask for an input. In this case, I could say John. Notice that there's no prompt or anything, it's just ask for an input, and I'll say John. So if I print now my first name, I get John. Let's run this again. And this time I'll put in Jane. And now if I run the second one, it gives me Jane. But notice there's no prompt that tells me or asks the user what to put in. So you could put a string inside input and say, enter your first name. And let's do a colon. Okay. I'll put the print of the first name, since say, and do a input here and say your first name is, and we'll put the output of the user's input here. And let me remove this so that it's not confusing. So let's run this. Oops, I am missing, of course, a close quote. And run this. See, now I see enter your first name, and I can now say John. And now it displays your first name is John. Let's run this again. We'll do Jane, and your first name is Jane. Now this is how you can ask inputs from a user using the input function. Now, let's say we wanted to enter in the age. So we can also say input and say, how old are you? Let's add a space. And then we can do a print and say, your age is, and we can do age. Make sure we close that quote. Run this, how old are you? 35. And it says your age is 35. Now, this works fine. But what if you wanted to say, let's keep things simple, and then we wanted to say print in 5 years time, you will be, and say age, new age. This is a new variable, we haven't put it in. So new age, years old. Let's just say you wanted to add 5 years to the age of the particular person. So simple math, we can say new age, and we can say age plus 5. Okay, looks logical. So let's add a little bit more spaces here so that it's a little bit clearer for you. So you ask the user for the age, and then we'll say your age is, and then we'll add 5 years to the age, and we'll store that in new age, and then we'll print new age here, years old. See what happens when we run this code. And we'll say 35, and we'll run it, and we get an error. Why are we getting an error here? And the error here is saying you can only concatenate strings, not int to string. The reason we're getting this error is because by default, the input function will always return a string. So this value of age, this 35 that you see here, though it looks like a number to you, is actually a string, not an integer. So you cannot add 5 to this. Okay? So one way to fix this, okay, is that we will do something what we call type casting. So there are two ways to do this. So once you have your age, you can actually say, we can now change age, and we can change this to an integer by enclosing this in a function called int. Now we're saying that int change age into an integer, then add 5 and store it to new age. New age now will contain the integer value of whatever age was plus 5. So let's run this. So how old are you? I would say 35. And see, it works now because this is now an integer where we can now add 5. So now your new age becomes 40. Now you can do it this way. The most popular way of doing this, since we know that this input here, this age, you want this to be an integer. So what we can do is that rather than having input return a string, we can enclose this with an int and say int. Now this is now going to be, this will now return an integer. Because of int out here, it will convert the string that's coming from this function and convert that into an integer. So age will now be an integer. We don't need to change it down here anymore. So if we run this, let's, instead of 35, let's do 40 so that we can see the difference. And now you see, in 5 years time, you will be 45 years old. Because we don't need to change age anymore from string to integer, we've already done it up here. So most people may not understand why there's an int there. So this is what we call typecasting. We can also change this to a float, for example. Because for example, if we run this, and this time we say, how old are you? I am 56.5. And now we get that error because 56.5 is not an integer. And then we're getting that error because 56.5, you cannot convert this into an integer. So if you want to be able to accept 56.5, you can change this to a float. So now this returns a float. So if you run this now and say 55.5, and that works just fine. So you can always change these to the appropriate format that you want to use. There's another trick that I'd like to be able to show you. Let's say you wanted to get, we were asking the user for first name, right? Now let's say we wanted the user to enter, let's say we want to do input, and we want the user to, what is your complete name? And then we'll tell them we want your first name, last name. This is what we want to ask the user. Now, since we're asking for this, let's say we do first name. Now let's just do name, okay? And then after that, we'll print and say name. We run this, we'll say John Wick, and that works just fine. But let's say we wanted first name and last name, we want them to be separate. You can actually do first name, and then you can do a comma and say last name. So you're now getting two outputs. But since input only returns one item, you could actually end this with what we call a split function. Now, using the split, it will look for the space. And then from between the spaces, it will distribute it depending on first name and last name. So now if we change this and we say print, and we'll do a formatted string and say your first name is, and we'll do first name, and your last name is, and we'll do last name. So now we've distributed that first name and last name. So let's run this. If I would do John space and then Wick, it goes into your first name is John and your last name is Wick. However, if we run this and this time we say John Wick, there's no space, see what happens. We get the error. The reason we're getting the error is because this input, because of the split, is now expecting a space in between. Just to let you know, because it's expecting two values, first name and last name, because of that split. So this works only if your user actually pastes John space and Wick, then that works fine. Later on, during the course, you will review how we can actually fix errors such as this, but for now, you can actually split outputs using the split if you want to get that particular input from the user. I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next lesson.